think that through my life, I've had a lot of frustrations with the advertising world, with the creative world, in the way that we connect with the challenge, the way that we connect with our consumers, and how we collect insights, how we come up with some hypothesis for solutions, and we test, we don't test. I've made a lot of mistakes in my time, and I feel like the advertising world is still structured in a way that is quite old. So about 4 years ago, I set off to do something that tries to solve a bit of that. So I'm going to open up my little presentation here, and let's see if I can connect everyone. So I'm going to now share my screen. Please tell me if you guys see this. Is this good?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, cool. Okay, so I think to say that this is a masterclass might be a little bit of an overpromise, but we're going to go through the way that I structure creative sprints. And I think that by the end of this, you should have a very good idea on what are the key ingredients to make people successfully come together and work towards a goal. All right, so the first things first is you can download all of this presentation later. I'll give you the link. So if you like something, instead of like trying to write it down or screenshot, you can relax about it. All right, so I'm going to show you it's a tiny 5-second video, but you won't be able to hear the sound. But this is
Tonight, the deep dive, one company's secret weapon for innovation.
And it was ABC.
We went to IDEO, the product design folk, and said, take something old and familiar, like, say, the shopping cart, and completely redesign it for us in just 5 days.
And they've redesigned a very common object, like a push cart from a supermarket, in only 5 days. And I was super taken by it. I couldn't believe my eyes. And I watched this video, which was a maybe 10-minute video about this group of nerd-looking people coming together. And they were incredible people, like anthropologists and engineers from MIT and designers. And they would go into a supermarket, talk to the people that would be using the carts, understanding the problems, creating hypotheses, brainstorming, trying to figure out the solutions. They had welders. They had like people that would, assemble the new card and test it. I was so impressed by it because for the first time I saw something that usually would take days and days or months or years compressed into a 5-day period. And I said, this is incredible. And I learned back then that this was about this thing called innovation. And so, 20-something years in advertising later and doing things in a very unglorious, old-fashioned way, I started to look around me and I said, how interesting that a lot of different communities are hacking or kind of trying to take a process that is very long-lived and they're trying to squeeze it into just a few days. And it kind of works. So you have an example of Marie Kondo from, there's a show from her on Netflix. She comes to your house and kind of reorganizes how you see your house, where you put your shit. And it's a very aggressive process. There's all this kumbaya thing around it, but essentially she changes the way you relate to your house very quickly. Then you have another example like the writer's room for Saturday Night Live. And again, it's one of America's longest running comedy show. In which they put together like 25, 30 writers, and they have to, from one day to the next week, write, the whole show that's going to be live next week with all of the approval processes, different actors playing different things, production realities. It's something that was deemed to be impossible, but they got it done. So like this group of people comes together to create like an insane amount of interesting content quickly. Then you have this dude who in 2007, I think, coined this term, the 4-hour work week. Somehow he was able to compress everything that he needed to get done as an entrepreneur into just 4 hours a week. And it's a bit of a gimmick, but he was able to also work a process that squeezes that long process into something short. And finally, one of my favorites, because I used to watch him all the time, Gordon Ramsay, Kitchen Nightmares. Again, he comes into a failed business, a failed restaurant, and very quickly changes it around from the people that are running it, how it looks visually, the content, how the back office is done, finances. Again, something that was deemed to be impossible, and this very aggressive TV production does it in only a few days. A lot of preparation, but everything is aggressively put together very quickly. So I started to see around me that this idea of sprinting that was taken from an agile modeling of innovation, product development, digital product development, was starting to be applied everywhere else, right? And there is a mindset that permeates these groups of people that are sprinting now and trying to compress a lot of great output into very short time. It's usually a very small collective that is highly empowered to make decisions and to call the shots and keep progressing. There is none of that like chain of approval that sometimes slow things down to a halt. Very aggressive creativity. So it's about kind of rethinking new models instead of just incremental creativity. And it's very fast and lean. So you have to apply pressure and it has to be very lean. There is a fifth element, which is tested, but not all of them test with consumers, their hypothesis. Some of them, they just aggressively push it forward and there's something at the end of the line after 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. But understanding that you too, anyone can go ahead and just sprint the shit out of a problem. So I think being very frustrated in advertising and having all that stuff happening around me and startups popping up, people putting things together, MVPs, I'm like, there has to be a way to create communication and creative solutions for brands, be it branding, be it new products or communication in a faster way. And then when you look at my world, which is advertising, it's a world that has been structured since the 50s in a very waterfall fashion. So it's very process driven. Essentially, it's very large, it's very structural, very hierarchical. Someone has to approve who works in someone's team, and so up and down, very dependent on that chain of approval. There's an idea of iterative creativity. If you give huge jumps and huge leaps of creativity within communication, it's considered to be very risky. Brands usually don't buy that. They shy away from that level of risk. Very bloated, slow. You have managing managers. It's just an insane situation. So the question was, how can we apply this very streamlined sprinting technique into advertising? Well, voila, 4 years ago, the Sexy Beast, which is my company, is born. And we have been doing this for 3.5 years, almost 4 years now. We've done 35 of these creative sprints that last 5 days. We've traveled around 14 countries because we go where the clients are. And we take, expertise, some international, some from that location. We've worked with 150 experts, and I'll tell you more about that. And we work around 3 sprint types, the same way that IDEO works around product development, and Google has their creative sprints around digital products. We have our sprints within communication, branding, and digital products. So we decided to focus on 3 outputs. All right, I'm gonna show you this extremely quickly because it's just a flash of some elements as an output for a sprint that we have done in Hungary for Wizz Air, which is Europe's fastest growing airline. It's a low-cost airline, and it was a communication sprint. So we created a campaign for them with an activation, all of the assets, films, celebrities, like everything was resolved within 5 days up until like the final execution, which was really cool. So this is just for you to get a glimpse of like, there's a lot of things produced. I don't want to dwell too much into that. And this other one, it's a very dear project as well called Helsinki Distilling. It's Finland's premier distillery, and we did this in Helsinki, and it was a slightly different sprint, which was branding. So they needed to rebrand, discover what's in the core of the brand, create the way that they would talk to consumers, change themselves visually. And so this is kind of what came out of it. We not only did all of those brand structures, but we got all the way down into packaging, and we changed everything for this brand up to the final assets within only 5 days, from brief to this delivery. So it's quite exciting. I'm going to show you guys how I usually do this. And we're going to have a lot of stops along the way for questions. So I want to be able to answer questions as they arrive. So please bear with me. This is a bit of a longer introduction, and then we'll keep stopping. All right. The creative sprint. I very much divide it into my mind into two. Even though I talk to my clients and I say it is a process that very much takes 5 days, there's a lot of preparation. In advertising, we're kind of used to just winging it a little bit. Like, you know, comes a brief, somebody thinks about it, we bring it back, and then it's not quite that. The brief was not really correct. New information came into the machine, we redo. So, you know, it's very little preparation and a lot of dispersed heat, a lot of back and forth. We don't like that. When you create a sprint, you have to be very precise about how you prepare. And then the sprint, which is the time that you spend using everyone's time, has to be perfectly orchestrated. So let's talk a little bit about how I prepare these sprints. So there are 4 basic questions that I ask. One is, what exactly do we want out of this? This is one of the key elements, and there's a lot of caveats in there. Then, who needs to come? Very important. Where are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? So you have to have huge discussions around this. My discussions to prepare sprints usually take anywhere from 2 months, and as fast as I can run is probably 3 weeks before we actually sprint. I cannot possibly put together a sprint in a few days and make it happen, because you need to be very precise and get all the information ahead of time. All right, so let's get to what. What is very important for us. We are not in the business of consultancy. We're in the business of delivering. We want to deliver a final product. So we don't take people's time and we just move ahead. And at the end, we show you a nice deck that says, well, the wind is blowing in that direction. You should go more there. Goodbye. No, we have to be very precise. So understanding the challenge, questioning that challenge, understanding if that question that has arisen in order to create a sprint is really the big question to be asked. We are very, like, sometimes the clients get a bit defensive with us because we really get it in their faces and we say, are you sure this is it? And stuff. They're not used to that kind of questioning. So I think you have to prepare this challenge extremely well. You have to collect all the information that you need for the sprint, understanding what's happening with the consumer, whatever you need to uncover, what's going on culturally, what are the barriers, who are we competing against, what's going on in the media landscape. You need to collect all that information. You cannot come in unprepared and then go search, because you will lose time. The second thing is be very precise about the output. So again, because I don't work within pure innovation in which I don't know what's going to come out, I usually know what's going to come out. So when we do branding, I know it's precisely brand guidelines that may contain or not a manifesto that needs to be filmed. We want a website that comes out of it. We want a poster. So we have to be very precise about what we want out of this time together. One of the things that I've seen that is a big failure in sprinting is when you come in unprepared. You don't have all the information, which is this what, and you don't know exactly what you want out of it. Do not come into a sprint just wanting to advance things forward. Be very precise about where you want to get. It'll make everything else very easy. The next thing is who, and this is a shot of a sprint we did also in Finland, by the way. And you see a group of people. It's usually very informal, which is nice. But I'll show you what's behind this. So we have different types of people in this room. My partner is this guy sitting next to the TV called Jussi. And the way that we see the group that we bring to the sprint is very specific. We bring clients. By clients, I mean the people that have the problem, right? We want to be able to drink their brains. A client will never be able to tell you everything they know unless they are in the middle of the process. You won't be able to download his brain into a brief, ever. You're gonna miss everything that's important. So we want them in the process. Then we also bring in a group of creatives. So these are your usual suspects from the creative world of an agency. You can have designer, copywriter, film director. In this case, we had a photographer, but you can have an array of other people, media specialists, content strategists, influencer market, you can, whoever you want. The third part is very key for us. So this client, they make children's clothing, performance apparel. Think of it as the North Face, but for kids. So we said, we need to take people who understand your business and bring another lens into this that you're not seeing today. So we brought a child development psychologist from MIT, by the way, which is really cool. And we brought a retail marketing expert from a company that was H&M, which is someone who competes with them. That person had worked at this competitor, and we brought her. So we have to create the perfect conditions with the right types of people. Always think about it. The people who know the problem and understand where they're going, creative people who are able to connect things, and you need field experts to give the whole room a new perspective on things, a wider perspective on things. All right, finally, location and experience. I think what I've learned about location is that if you create a sprint is something that is supposed to be special. Even if you make it for 6 hours or 5 days, if you do it inside the office and you take a little shitty room and you just call everyone after lunch when they're tired and say, sit here for 3 hours, it's not going to work. You have to make it something of a celebration. You have to say, this is special. This is not a treatment you get every day. We value your time. We value the amount of effort that's going to come into this. Let's make this special. So we usually rent a space outside of the client's office, but we want to be very close. So it's easy to come in and out with the bus, with the train, whatever it is. So we've done once at this beautiful house in Rio next to the Christ. We've also done it in very corporate looking spaces, which is just as well. We've done in crazy places like a wine cellar underground in Stockholm. It was like 5 degrees inside. We almost froze to death. We've rented like villa. This was a villa that we rented in Mallorca, like a house, and everybody slept at the house. We've done it inside the Royal Theatre in Nottingham in the UK. We've done it in someone's house in the middle of Holland. It was, again, a very informal thing. We glue shit to the wall. So it doesn't matter where you do. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be special. You have to create an aura that when you enter the space, it's unique. It's not business like every day at the office. And then we make it like nice and stuff. You have like little trinkets. We brand everything nice according to what the client is. It really has to be a special thing. And there's, you know, moments in which we pause to chill out, and there's games and yoga. So yeah, that guy is smoking while he's playing ping pong, it's true. The food, we try to do it informal, but it's pretty nice, blah, blah, blah. The final part of the preparation is the how. So this is also key. I've been invited before I started the Sexy Beast to a lot of like hackathons and sprints and stuff like that. They're mostly bullshit. They are just a bunch of people sitting together with a very loose agenda, with a very loose timeline, trying to get to a very loose output that nobody really is quite sure what it is. In our case, I really advise you guys to be very precise about creating a specific agenda. Our agenda, you see here, this is how we kind of prepare it ahead of time in, you know, Google anything, spreadsheets. It's like 10 minutes for one thing, 20 minutes for the other thing. Who's going to do it? We have pauses, we have break, we have buffers because we know people get late. So we get down to the minute details of what happens in every single moment of these 5 days. This is key. You have to be very prepared because the clock is ticking. There is no time for mistakes. You have to bake in the time for mistakes within your agenda. So work on that. All right, so this is the preparation. What are we going to do? Who are we going to do with? Where are we going to go? what are we going to do? What's the process? Now, I'm going to count down 5 minutes. I think this is still good timing. And I would like you guys to use the chat little room here. And if you have any questions about preparation, please shoot it at me. And I'm going to try to answer as best as I can. So here we go. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to look at the little chat thing here. If anybody has any questions, please go ahead. How many participants? I'm going to read a few, okay? How many participants in the preparation? Usually it's my partner and I, which is 2. And then we involve in due course, sometimes sessions with the client. I look for the talent usually. So we divide and conquer. It's not a lot of people. It's just 2 of us. Sometimes we hire, let's say, a project manager when we need to scout for location in a country that we are not in. But we usually like to take care of everything. So it's not complex. How long does it take to prepare? Like I said, we've done it quickly in 3 weeks, and we sometimes need 2 months, not much more than that. How to make sure people don't use their phones. I'm going to talk about it soon. What's the most fearful from client side when pushing them? So why many preparation advance? What do clients fear the most? I think the clients fear the most that you are unprepared, that you're going to take all of their money and this is going to be just another sprint that gets them kind of nowhere. This is the biggest fear of clients. I've seen it before. I know it's kind of exciting, but it doesn't do very much. How do you assure participants they don't deviate from the original purpose? I'll talk about that when we get to the details of the sprint. How do you define the experts you need and when do you integrate them? So, okay, that's a good point. I'm going to mention them a little later. Okay, for in-house creative team, how do you define participants? That's a very good question. So a lot of groups already have their own creative directors, designers, and they want their team to participate. The question that I usually ask is, if your, let's insert any name here, if your UX designer is brilliant and he is the guy who will lead us, then you probably don't need this sprint. You're usually taking the sprint because you want to go beyond what your own internal team can do. Having said that, I usually say we're going to hire, let's say, a super senior, amazing guy, UX designer who's probably above your own, but do take your people. So I am very open to taking as many people on the client side as possible. It's more about attitude than it is about skill set. So I've worked with a lot of people that were very junior at companies and the clients brought them along and it was brilliant. And I've worked also with people that were at the company for a long time and didn't embrace the process and it was really hard. So I think it's more about having the willfulness of working hard and being thrown into something completely new. If you like that, come, because I think anyone at a certain company can add. How to convince clients to not use their plain infra when spend, oh shit, I missed that, and spend money going to a nice place. Oh yeah, good question. How do I convince them to not just tell me, oh, we have an empty room here? So I usually tell them, from my experience, if you just put an empty room or a meeting room inside your office, what really happens is that the phone's going to ring. Somebody's going to say, oh, no, this is really key. I just need to walk out of the room for 5 minutes and sign this document and I'm coming back. So we cannot have that level of disruption. That is what kind of kills the sprint. So I need to take people physically outside of the office. That is one of the things that's, if the clients don't insist in that, even though it would be cheaper. Usually we try to make it cheap. Like I prefer to go under a bridge, but I cannot stay inside your company because people are not going to stay within the room. My God, it's a lot of good questions. Okay, so I think we're coming to an end. I'm sorry, last minute. We know it's very different sprint campaign for an MVP for digital product and sprint for new brand, which is something that's supposed to last for a long time. When it comes to a new brand, do you believe that you can do a new value proposition and brand expression in 1 week? Yes. So that's what we do. I think the question here from Camila Moleta is, that's fine for digital product. Do you do that for branding? Oh, yes. And later on, you can connect with me, Camila. I'll show you some of the outputs that we've done. I've done 35 sprints. I would have to say that about 22 of them were branding. So it's about finding, you know, exactly the core of the business, do the golden circle, create how they talk, tone of voice, visual, do applications of that. Oh, the time. So yes.
Also time, Andre. You got 40 minutes. Don't worry. Don't rush.
No, but there's much more to come. So
okay.
We will tackle these questions a little bit ahead of time. And okay, so the last one, in these pandemic times, have you done any session remotely? Yes, I have done sessions remotely. There is one advantage to them, which is not very clear, but when we bring people to the sprint and it's physical, I have to make a decision. I have to say, we will bring one brand designer. And we have to trust that that guy who's very senior has done this for 20 years will solve the problem, right? Even though it's with the help of the group, that guy will develop it. When I do it remotely, I try to bring more people to bear. So I usually take, let's say, 2 or 3 brand designers for just one day because they're remote. And then they each work on certain ideas. Then we do a little bit of, sorry, there's an ambulance coming by. But I do a bit of a quick pitch for like during a day. Then the whole group internally sees the results. We select the designer that we want to work. And then we just move further with one. So I'm able to bring a little more talent remotely. That's the good part. The bad part is that when you don't see each other, when you're not really like touching the same thing physically, there is a distance psychologically that is kind of bad for the project. I think it makes everyone more distant. It's very tiring to be sitting in front of a screen and doing this. So I do not like it very much. All right, so let's get back to it. I'm going to share my screen again, and then we'll continue. Thank you for the questions. Hold on, what the hell is... Stop. Okay, now let me do it again. Share. I think you guys can see this, so I'm just gonna move along. All right, so that was preparation. Let's talk about the sprint itself. I've made a decision to show you guys how a communication sprint works as opposed to branding or digital product development. They work in a certain way, they work similarly, but we're going to get into details and they are different. So sorry for this example, perhaps for this group of people, I should have taken digital product or branding, but let's look at communication. So everyone will have that problem one day or the other. How do you get people to know that you exist and want to buy you, right? So that will happen to all of us, death and taxes, and having some communication. All right, so let me show you how days 1 through 5 go. All right, day 1 for us is very much about sharing knowledge. This is all that we do on day 1. Essentially, we don't work, we don't create anything, we just learn. It's a very important step to have these sprint days not merge into each other. Like people thinking like day 2 looks like day 4, looks like day 3. People get discouraged and confused. So you have to make these days stand out because they have to be very different from each other. All right, so day 1, and I'm gonna talk about cell phones. So day 1 is content maelstrom, how we call it. This is about setting the stage to our challenge, right? The first thing is about being totally committed to the sprint. So you guys had questions around, you know, how do we convince the client to spend some money and take everyone to a new location? It is necessary because we live in such busy days that whenever you have the chance to just focus on one thing for 2 hours, it's such a privilege, let alone a full week, right? So we mean business. This is an important step. This is usually something that companies don't hire us to do this for them 25 times a year. It's usually for something that is key and it requires a lot of energy. So because everybody is committed, because money has been spent, because we're doing this whole amazing experience for everyone, I demand commitment from the team. So the first thing that I do is computers are not allowed up until a certain day, and I take away the cell phones. So when you ask me, how do I guarantee that people are not on their phones? Because I yank them out of their hands, okay? So we pass this little box around And we say all the phones will go into the box. People get a little bit scared. And then whenever we have breaks, which is every 1.5 hours, people were, of course, able to pick up their phones, go have a coffee, call their kids or whatever they want to do. But while they're there, they don't pick up the phone. I have opened up some spaces for people that were like, you know, like my wife is at the hospital giving birth, something crazy like that, obviously. But I usually like to take all the phones away. If you have not done this before in your life, you will see that people will grudgingly agree. They go, oh my God, oh my God. And then after 5 days, they will say, I can't believe how effective I was. Thank you for taking this shit out of my hands for a while. So it's difficult, but it will pay off. All right. The second part of day one is actually the sharing of information. So what we do in day one is that we challenge each one of the participants who are coming to the sprint to tell the whole group, what do they know that is key for everyone to know? Why is that important? Because you would say that otherwise we become just like a regular agency process. You will say, well, I don't know any of that. Let's wait for the designer to solve. We don't know about cost. Let's wait for the sales guy to tell us if we can spend this. I don't know how the product works. Let's get the product guy to tell us if we can insert this into the product, right? So that slows down. That's what makes processes become so long and so frustrating. So what we say is, product guy, you have 10 minutes and you have a presentation to tell us everything that we're able to insert new into this product, how long it takes, what are you willing to commit to? We tell the designer guy, tell us what are your key tenets of design so that we know how you think and we can also make decisions with you. Tell us, why do you think that a brand should be A, B, or C? Why are you looking at this spectrum of colors? Why do you believe that, you know, simplicity in logo type is so important? So we all of a sudden, as the day moves about, the idea is to have instilled a little bit into each one of us someone who understands about budget, someone who understands about timing, someone who understands all the constraints and all of the information that comes to bear, how consumers think. So it's very important to create this mind meld situation where we all are leveled and we all have kind of similar information because we're all going to attack at the same time the problem from different angles, okay? So this is really key. And here you see me doing this. Like, you know, it's very typically presenting something on screen. Sometimes we create like mood boards, stuff on the wall because we want to see how the competition is doing. This is something we did for the airline. We wanted to see what everyone else was talking around the world. Again, it's very informal. It's about sharing. It's a bit of pre-work, but it's like a 10-minute presentation. It's not big. Sometimes what we do as well is to get our hands dirty. So for Helsinki Distilling, we obviously took some time and took everyone to visit the distillery and we tried the drinks, obviously. When we did Reima for the kids' clothing, we talked to kids, we went inside a school. So you have to create day one in a way that it's exciting, that people are learning and they're sharing information. The other part, I think the final part of day one that I want to talk about is that whenever you throw information at people and it's too much of it, because it's like, you know, 8 hours of information, even though they're writing down what's important, they will lose insights. So what we do is, in order to sediment the information, every time we have a chunk of information, of new information, let's say 30 minutes, we do a quick round of 3 minutes to get everyone to write on Post-its the 2 most important things that they've learned, for instance, right? And so that's the way that we keep what's key in everything that we're learning on the wall. And then we start to divide this wall into, you know, spaces and things like that. But it's very important to do different types of knowledge sharing and then making sure you do a bit of an exercise to sync the knowledge, extract what's key, and so we go. All right, now I'm gonna do a little pause again. And I would like to see if you guys have questions specifically about day one, about what is this whole idea of everybody bringing something, exchanging information, taking the phones away. Please go ahead. All right, first, Do you send homework to the clients to prep content to share on day one? How do you find the content you need? Absolutely. The client has tons of homework to do, tons. He is preparing a lot of things that we don't know. So we are asking him, usually there's a bit of a breakdown. It's a bit complex now, but we break down into the history of the brand. What was the inception time? Like, tell us exactly, how did you have the idea? Did you do this inside Starbucks? Because we want to be able to pull in some kind of cultural information. So we break it down for him exactly what we want extracted from his knowledge. So yes, the client has a lot of homework. What about surfing the web on computers? That doesn't happen until day 3. So no computers or phones until day 3. How do you know if you have a good or bad day 1? That's a good question. I think a good day 1 is when people leave day 1 energized, because it's a very tough day. When you're not producing anything and you're just kind of watching, it's a different type of tiring. It's very tiring. When you're just actually doing things, which is day 2, and you're producing ideas and you're challenging them, you're so involved that it goes faster and it's less tiring. So I think my level of success for day 1 is to make it exciting enough that people are not tired and discouraged by the end of it. How do you set boundaries to prevent analysis paralysis? Oh my God, I don't know if I understand exactly what analysis paralysis means, but I think that if I can extrapolate that question a bit, I think that a lot of times we do a lot of good prep work, but we only know if there's something, sometimes we realize there's something missing then, only after day 1 has ended. We're like, oh my God, we really haven't covered what people with Alexa in their homes want from a supermarket. Oh my God, like, we might have missed something that comes to bear. So what we do then is that we try to search quickly at night and bring it for day 2. I got that day 1 is about sharing, but what is created in the end of the day, like Post-its? So yeah, nothing really. This wall that you saw with Post-its, it's kind of like the output of the best insights we took from day 1, but nothing gets done with it for communication. When we do branding, it's a different thing. We take that wall and we create a new organism with it, and we continue working with that wall on day 2. For communication, it's nothing like that. It's just in order to settle the knowledge. And then we look at the wall at the end of the day. Sometimes we group things. We kind of discuss them a little bit again. It's just to not let the very important things fly away. Sorry, let me just check. Well, I didn't even do the countdown. Great. Do you do some sort of prep work, materials to be read beforehand? No, very good question. So aside from the clients and us, us putting it together, and some of the field experts that we bring, sometimes, let's say, if I bring the person as an example, the behavioral psychologist from MIT, the child behavior psychologist, I will ask that person to make a presentation for day 1. Sometimes I ask also the designer to, also share with us how you see design in 10 minutes. But I don't ask anyone to do a deep dive into the challenge, they don't even know what it is. They don't know exactly what we're trying to do in this week. They know it's something to do with creating a campaign, but I don't want them to know. I don't want them to start to assimilate content out of context, alone, coming up with ideas or going into a space that they start to love, and it's none of that. I want people to come into this with preconceived ideas. So there's a lot of people that are very, into the process, and they're amazing people. They're like, André, what should I read? Like, how should I get prepared? I'm like, do not rest. That's how you get prepared, because it's going to be a tough week. The learning session between the team is like a TED talk, different topics ad hoc, ad actors. How do you choose the type of content to share with the team? Yeah, so it's very much like a TED talk, quickly, like 10, 15 minutes. What exactly is what we need to share during that time is a bit of a longer discussion. Jorge Garcia, talk to me later. I can give you some examples of what exactly we're preparing now. We have a new sprint coming up. I'll show you what we ask clients to prepare, essentially. It's a bit of, sometimes it repeats a lot, so there is a formula to that, but imagine that we're trying to get everything they know so that the whole group can know. All right, I think that's it. Let me move into day 2, which is exciting. All right. Share screen. Share. Here we go. Okay, so day 2 for communication, it starts to bring in something that is very key to sprinting. In the world of agile methodology and sprinting and fast product development or whatever you want to call it, it's about, instead of thinking about the possible best solution until your time is up, and then you test, and then you realize it wasn't quite that, what you have to do is very aggressively get to a huge volume of ideas and test them. So we are not in the business like an agency is of finding what is the one thing for you. On day 2 is about, we are in the business of finding what are the 50 possible things for you. And then slowly there is a process to go from 50 to recombining into 20 to selecting 5 to testing with consumers to arriving at the one thing that we think will work. So a big idea and testing, again, it's very different from, you know, challenging an agency or creative group to come up with a solution. They usually feel like they have to give you one solution. Here we're trying to find as many as possible. So the big story behind day 2 is to try to find volume. So we do a lot of curated brainstorm exercises, and they have varied formats. A lot of times it's drawing, sometimes it's, you know, theatrics, sometimes it's about just putting out one sentence. So there's a lot of techniques. There's been many books written about it. I am a collector of brainstorm exercises. I have my favorite ones. If anybody wants to share, I can share it later on. But the big goal of a sprint in whatever the hell it is you do, if it's digital product, whatever it is, don't settle for one idea. Find dozens. And once, so I think that is the bit of our technique. It's kind of like brutal volume. We only know if we arrived at it, if we can see enough of it. When you have a lot of people in the room, if you end up at one idea or 2 or 3, there will always be the nagging question. We could have gone further. We could have seen more things. What about if we only, you know, stop here and next week we pick up and there might be something else. So also psychologically, you have to put people in a lot of different paths, and you have to be sure that you have a lot of variety to choose from. There are techniques, again, as I said, in terms of brainstorming exercise, how you make sure that people are going in different directions and not coming up with the same ideas. We'll talk about that separately. But essentially, that's what it is. Exercises, different groups, then we break this large group into, like, you know, smaller units. And it's a huge mix at this stage. I don't care if it's the janitor with the CEO, with the junior designer, the next group is sales with, it does not matter. We don't have to have a creative in every group. This is because the brainstorm exercises are very directed and they're very interesting. You know, sometimes the challenge, just to give an example, how do you solve this problem by going upside down in a banana? So I think if whoever has ever run a brainstorm session understands that when you're brainstorming, there are a few rules, like no negative assumptions. We don't, you know, try to validate or invalidate ideas as they get created. It's about going really big, because later on you can mold all of that, all of those raw ideas. So again, the goal is just like go, do many, more. When you have 10, go 20. When you have 20, go 40. Just keep pushing. So these are some tools and exercises that we do. It's super fun. I'm just showing you a few pictures. We've done this in many different places and different stages. A lot of our ideas, we like to draw them, at least even if we have done different exercises for them, we just want to draw something so that once we have 50 things to choose from, we remember what they are. If you just write, it's very difficult to tell what's going on. All right, so a lot of ideas, everybody exposes them, different plays. This lasts 5-6 hours. It's really cool. And then we are towards the end of day 2, once we have a lot of options, we are left with a dilemma. We have 50 things. What is the best one out of all of them? And then we have a process for that. Number 1 is whatever feels emotionally exciting is closer to the right idea. So we don't apply an evaluation criteria very early on. We just give people Post-its that are like votes, and we say, you have a limited number of votes, let's say 5. Go around the room, get acquainted with the ideas, and vote on your 5 favorite ones. You only have 5 votes, there's 50 ideas. So first, because it's such a high number of ideas, we need to get a gut feeling of what is the one thing that people are falling in love with. We do not have the time to drill down inside 50 ideas to see if they have merit or not. So they are as they are. Once we do that funneling down, we are left with a lot less ideas. Let's say then we have 15, and then the conversation starts getting a bit deeper. Then we insert an evaluation criteria. For instance, is this doable in the budget that we have? Do we have access to the technology that we want to create this? Do we have access to the influencers or to the singer that we want? Otherwise, this is not going to work. Is it on brand? Does it make people want to share? Whatever the hell it is that are the criteria for you, for your successful output, that's when we start to apply it a little more aggressively. So I don't start applying it big, I start applying it when we have something more manageable. And there's a huge discussion that follows. It lasts like almost 1.5 to 2 hours. And then we finally arrive at a short list. So the big thing during the sprint, again, it is not for the group to find the solution. It's for the group to find the best hypothesis. Whoever is going to find the solution for us is our final consumer. So this is really key. At the end of day 2, and this is kind of like everybody's tired, we've worked a lot, we only have a few ideas left that we kind of quickly like resketch them to look a bit better. It's still a very open conversation. It's still all over the place, but we sit with a panel of consumers that we prepared ahead of time. Sometimes we do it on Skype and stuff like that. We put it in front of them. We tell them simply what the ideas are, and we have a conversation. Again, there's a method to doing this, so you don't lead people, you don't get excited about one and they think that's what it is. You let one person talk over others. So there's a little bit of a method to test all of this. But just for you guys to remember now, lots of ideas, internal discussion, you have a short list, that's what you test. And I will say, without being very ashamed of it, that the group, we work in a bubble, right? The agency, the group, the client, whatever. Even if you expand this bubble to 20 people from all over the place, it's still a bubble. I would say that 50% of the times we've entered testing on day 2 saying, let's put these 3 or 4 ideas in there. I'm sure they're gonna go for one because we love one and we already defined that this is one, but let's just see. And then consumers look at it, we have a conversation with them and they choose number 2. It's very, very, very common. So once I start doing this, I realize, my God, how much we create in a bubble, right? So it's very important for us to get this very important external breath of fresh air from consumers. And the point of doing the test is not to say, well, they've chosen number 2, so it is number 2. It's a moment for us to reflect, step back and say, wow, we were all about 1. They were all about 2. Do they have anything negative about 1 that would invalidate it? Do we still feel like maybe number 2 is good? Could we perhaps merge? So another conversation starts. The role of testing is not for us to delegate. It's up to them to decide because they're the consumers, because this is still in a very raw format. So it suffers a bit while it gets tested, but it's for us to get that perspective. Fine. Okay, so this is, consumers come and they get, this is the old bottle, by the way, and we give them alcohol, so they love to come and like little things like that. A lot of times we don't pay these people, they just love to be part of it. Whenever we paid in the past, it kind of sucked a little bit. We got a lot of like professional beta testers kind of thing, and they suck. Anyway, so we do it on Skype a lot of times when we need to test a product that is global, when we need to test simultaneously in China, the UK, Russia, whatever. So sometimes if it's a local brand, we bring everyone in the room. It's always better to be in person. Otherwise, we do maybe 1 session in person, 1 session remotely. And then you have to make the decision. You have to say, we go here. We have to make a decision. This is a key moment. It's very stressful because a lot of times the whole group is not unanimous about it is number one. And you have to navigate this time very carefully. I would spend like another huge masterclass just talking about how you manage different personalities inside the teams and how you get people that don't have their way to fall back into the group and not get discouraged, blah, blah, blah. But I think suffice to say is you have to keep mulling over the ideas until you have the vast majority on your side. If you don't have at least the majority on your side, obviously your ideas are, you haven't arrived, which is supposed to not happen. It's never happened to me. But I've left day 2 with about 80% of people on board and 20 people kind of banging their foot on the floor and saying, oh my God, we should have done 3. That's just the nature of this. You can be a democracy up to a certain point, but at some other point, this becomes a bit of an autocracy, and you have to know when to change that switch. All right, guys. Day 2 is a very exciting day. That's when we find what the hell we came to do, and we have a solution for it. Let me get your questions. I'm going to stop again sharing, and I'm going to read the chat. Doubt it. In this risk criteria, is there no risk of good ideas that are not so sexy to be left out? Yes. Yes. So the way that we do this, I have a very good eye for some of the ideas that are really good. Before we actually start bringing down 50 to, a manageable 15, we sometimes combine the ideas. Or we say, well, this idea, there was nothing here, but what if it became part of this? So we try to arrange a little bit that universe of 50 so that we don't have something that has potential kind of lost. A lot of times, a small idea that, didn't get a lot of love while it was getting done, once we discuss it, it rises. But it's true. If you don't have a visceral reaction, like sometimes I look at, 50 things on the wall and everybody had 5 posted votes. And then all of a sudden there's an idea that didn't get any vote from anyone. And when I pull it out of the wall, somebody says, oh, but I'm like, well, this is what I want. If you didn't go there emotionally, no one will. If nobody cared about that emotionally, our consumers will not care. So is there a risk of killing a good idea in its bud? Yes, there is. But I think that if nobody had a visceral reaction to it at all, it dies. Are you going to grow a mustache? No. Only I wish I could grow on top of my head, but nothing else grows in there. Okay, let's see. I imagine the test group is made up of your target audience divided into different mind models, clusters, right? Yes. So we take our target audience. A lot of our clients might not be as refined as having different clusters, and they might have different personas, but we try to have a composition that reflects his audience. It's not so simple. A lot of times we cannot get the perfect people. So that's why we take the testing with a bit of a pinch of salt. A lot of times, for instance, when we test in China, we end up picking up the people that are in China but speak English. Obviously, that already biases the sample because it's people from a certain background that can speak multiple languages. So we know that our testing is not as robust and perfect as if we had stopped 2 months to do proper testing around the world, but we try to do as best as possible in the time. Okay, let me see. You put only creatives to think of ideas to be tested, or is everyone involved? Everyone is involved. Everyone has their phones off. Everyone is working on this. People who have never even drawn anything on paper are now drawing horrible stick figures on paper. It doesn't matter. Like usually the drawings are horrendous to begin with. Go ahead. Nobody has to be afraid of it. Everybody is involved. How do you manage to bring sketch ideas instead of word ideas when the sprint is full online? That's really, really hard. That's one of the things that the online sprint lacks. We are trying to use a different collaboration tool right now and where people can draw. It's called Miro, M-I-R-O, but it doesn't work the same way. We lose a lot of speed if we want people to also remotely try to draw things and then show it on camera. So we leave it open when we do it remotely. You know, some people like to quickly sketch and just show it up to the camera, but we don't get it a lot. But when we do it physically, we force visuals to come out, even if it's horrible visuals. Have you ever been in a sprint where the ideas were not flowing well? What have you done? Because, yes, I think because you force the arrival of ideas that are so diverse, I don't think that I've ever seen a wall that I've always been able to manage to fill it with 40 to 50 ideas, that I looked at any of them, all of them, and I said, there is nothing here. No, that has never happened. After 6 hours of careful exercises with the right people that you've curated, there are good people to be there, and you've drank from the right insights, and you've managed these exercises well, it's impossible to abandon everything that's on the wall. So I think the key thing is less about there is nothing here, but how do you not kill ideas that have a lot of potential, that are on the wall, still very much at a proto stage? How do you go to their rescue? How do you make them bigger as you talk about them? Like, oh, we should keep this idea because of A, B, and C. When you start having more heated up discussions, when you only have 8, 6 to choose from. So you have to kind of help the idea a little bit. Miro is the best thing to happen in ideation world. Seriously, Camila Moleta, I agree. How do you keep spirits and morale up when you know the client got the safest choice? Did you saw creatives getting bored? No, man, creatives get like sweaty when they do this, because, you know, creatives are like, they're used to working in like, okay, you have 3 days to come up with this concept, and they think in a horrible fashion, usually not brainstorming, and they have to come up with like 1 good idea or maybe 2. So when they have to come up with like dozens of ideas, the exercises are like solve something in 8 minutes, 12 minutes. The creatives never get bored. They actually leave exhilarated. The clients that have never been part of this leave very exhilarated as well, confused. Nobody is bored on day 2, no one. Maybe on day 1 a little bit, but never on day 2. Branding sprints are different in here till this point. Yes, they are. Branding sprints on day 2 is when we find the core of the brand through a different technique, which is crossing 4 different quadrants that we take from the post-its of the day before. So it's completely different day 2. Awesome. All right. So guys, thanks for the questions. I'm going to move on. I think we're getting now to a little bit faster because I think it'll become a little clear where this is getting as we advance. I think the first few days a little more like, oh, this is kind of new, and the other days are more classic. All right, so day 3 is when we expand the idea. Remember, we selected the idea after talking to consumers, but it's still in a sheet of paper, right? It's still like a tiny little thing. So day 3, we use the model of like an hourglass. Day 1 is a lot of content that gets distilled. Day 2, we find the nugget that's right in the center of the hourglass. And day 3, 4, and 5 is we start expanding it and seeing how big this idea can get. Obviously, based on the limitations that we have in terms of money, time, team, everything else. So what we start doing from day 3 is all about chiseling this idea, opening it up. What we usually do for communication is to start breaking up teams. So remember, the teams have been working pretty much together, everybody in the same space, looking at presentations, exploring things together. On day 2, everybody is working, recombining, there's no roles. From day 3 onwards, I start using people's roles. So I give them back their computers, their cell phones, whatever they want, because now they have to research by themselves, and they're much more independent from us, from the people that are putting it together. So what we do is, according to what you want to achieve in the sprint, this is when it becomes very important. So here, in essence, this is a very generic example, but we break the teams up into the content ecosystem. So what kind of media are we going to use to make that idea come forth? How does this idea look like? It's usually a campaign that will have some kind of visual. What is the message exactly? So you have, then your copywriters go work on the message development, perhaps with someone from the client's team. So we always bring clients into these different creative teams as well. So it's a big mix, but you have the very senior people in each individual system kind of leading that. pre-production exploration. Okay, let me come back. All right, so in essence, there is a little bit of this going on. Of course, if you have more to deliver in 5 days, you will do more here. But essentially, contact ecosystem means what are we going to do, when, and strategically, why does it help the idea? So there is a larger group of people dealing with that because there's a lot of moving parts. Visual development, it's for the visual people, photographers, film, whatever you want. Designers. Message development is usually for copywriting. Sometimes the film directors go into message development as well. And pre-production exploration. I'm going to talk specifically about this on day 3 because I think it's key. Again, different from an agency or different from whatever else you do in the more traditional format. What people like to do is to say, I'm going to push this idea that we love into the client's guts, and I'm going to convince him that he has to spend twice as much money as he has. We have no idea if we can create an incredible machine that paints the sky with smoke, but we're going to suggest it regardless, and it's going to be great. In our process, none of that is possible or desirable. So we have a project manager in the team to start looking at how this idea is expanding and in real time calculating the consequences of that expansion. So he's saying, well, if you want 5 videos and each one of them will have a video clip with, you know, a Hollywood celebrity, that is amounting already to $2 million. So there is someone putting the reins within the team in terms of budget, timeline, and internal possibilities for the company, because you know we might end up developing something that then the company internally cannot put it together in time or whatever. So this is key. So from moment 1 in this day 3, we start creating times and perspective. Of course, it's not precise, but we start having an idea if we have to modulate these teams to stay within certain boundaries because these things are expanding too quickly in terms of money or access that we don't have. So this is key. And this project manager at this stage is almost like a celebrity. Everybody's like, okay, come check my idea. What do you think? Is it still? And then clients who are there, we're trying to calculate with them. And if the client is the kind of person that says, excite me, I will yank money out of somewhere else, fine, this is the time to do it. So I tell the client, pick up the phone and go call your boss, if that's the case, and get that extra 100,000 euros because we will need it. And if you don't get it in the next 2 hours, we're going to abandon the idea. What I want to deliver at the end of the process is not something that then we will see, but it's something that then we will do, okay? So this is key. I'll tell a quick story that happened to us when we did the airline Wizz Air. The concept was to put a bunch of people into an airplane and fly to an unknown destination. So you would sign up to fly, but you didn't know where you were arriving. It had everything to do with the brand core, which is, you know, being bold and exploring new places, blah, blah, blah. We had to secure a plane from the airline to do this, one from Vienna, one from London. So we took the client and we took her on the phone with the people who are in charge of like organizing where the planes go and how much they cost to secure a plane. If she couldn't secure the plane, we were going to abandon the idea. So she ran around that day in Budapest and she had to, like she told me this later, which I thought it was lovely. She had to she was very smart. She bought a bottle of whiskey and she took it to the CEO of the company that same day. And she said, we need an airplane. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be on CNN. We want it now. It's just one. It's one flight. Blah, blah, blah. She called the airport to see if we could put into the announcement of the airport, instead of having the final destination, if it was permitted by law to put unknown in there. So anyway, we do all of that search. Why? Because big ideas die in the details, right? So we need to look at as many details as possible. Otherwise, we abandon it right away. Okay. So this is day 3, expanding the idea. And at the end of day 3, sometimes we start involving some of the honchos, like the CEO and stuff like that. And it's just to start getting the people super high up, presidents and stuff like that, involved in what's going on and excited about the idea, so that at day 5, it makes easier for the idea to circulate internally at the company, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I would love the CEO to come and work in the sprint, but I hardly can get CEOs to come unless it's a startup. All right. All right, let's doubt it. Day 3, expanding the idea, making sure you have all of the information on you, and the groups break up and work separately. Let me know if there's any questions around there. Otherwise, we move on. How person who brings the team to reality is selected. How the person who brings the team to reality is, okay, maybe you're talking, how do we select that project manager, right? Who brings this team, the little bit of reality to the team. It's usually a senior producer, someone who has a very broad knowledge of whenever we do communication, it's usually broad knowledge that we're looking for, because we might end up, we don't know what the idea is. It can be an activation that is a rock concert, or it can be a website. So it's so varied that we don't know. So we need someone who knows, has seen a lot, but doesn't know details. If we're doing digital products, we need a project manager who is very skilled in digital, it's just digital assets. So, but it's essentially a project manager / senior producer that we bring. How to keep motivation from the clients to pursue this crazy idea and avoid the negative that people would never go for it. Yeah, well, that's key. I think when we had day 2 with Wizz Air, for instance, we ended up with safer ideas on the table, and we ended up with less safe ideas on the table. The consumers came, fell in love with the ideas that weren't so safe. That's the funny thing. When you pre-test and you consumers already say, fuck, my God, that is so cool, which they said when we put the idea of, would you go into a plane and you don't know where you're going to end up in Europe for the weekend? They were like, fuck yeah. So even if it's risky to operate, you have the certainty, or close to certainty, that your audience is going to bite. So with that certainty, it's very motivating for the client, for the internal team, to get over their fears and their barriers, because you have a higher chance of knowing that it's going to work. How do you potentialize the idea generation at the online context? At some sprints, I use constraints and they go well, but you have some ideas we can do home office. Oh man, this is okay. Let's talk separately, Larissa, about brainstorm exercise and stuff like that. But it's true. It's all about inserting very severe constraints and sometimes losing it up. So it's all about constraints. You're right. That's how I do it. What are the worst mistakes I like that there's a question mark upside down, very Spanish. What are the worst mistakes you made in carrying out the creative sprint process? How did those mistakes help you to improve the process? Man, I've made mistakes in every department. Like, well, this is not related to day 3, so I can talk a little bit later at the end, which is a good thing to talk at the end. But I'll give you a rundown from not preparing it correctly enough, from saying to the client, well, if you have no money, let's just do it internally. And then I suffered the fact that people just left the room because, it was urgent. So, oh my God, so many mistakes. It's like 4 years trying to make it better. Any client already complained about this rushy process once you need some decision from their part, extra budget, for example? Yes, every client, I think that there is a moment of truth. We try to sell the agile process to a lot of clients. A lot of them are very clear about it. They say, look, I'm not the one who calls the shots. Even my boss is not the one who calls the shots. I cannot be in the sprint because I'm very busy. My boss cannot be in the sprint. And I say, well, if those are your conditions, then this is not for you. So I think we only sprint with the people who are willing to understand the speed and the value of speed and are willing to commit to it. We know, because we during the preparation, we know the chain of signing off and all of that stuff. So we know who has to make the decision, and they're usually in the room. Or they're like, via satellite or something like that. But the big failure for us would be to see this as an agency output. Like, here's a great idea that then once it finishes and we took all of your money and we ran, then you're going to see if it works. That's too late. We're gone. You know what I mean? So my process is not to deliver something that's shiny and it may or may not be accepted. The role of the sprint is to deliver something that will happen. Have you tried having the decision maker in the sessions to have the okay budget confirmation on the spot as part of the sprint. Not only have I tried, but that's mandatory. So they're always there. The decision maker is there. One way to work around this is to say, look, if you're not the decision maker, let's say you're the product leader for a soap inside Procter & Gamble. I don't know, I'm just giving an example. We have to say, look, this is a special situation. You have to be empowered by your boss to work within certain constraints, be them budgetary or timeline. You have to know what you are able to make a decision on, and you cannot wash your hands off decisions because then the process doesn't work. So it's key. There's a lot of questions around decision. We pay a lot of good attention around that. We have failed in the past about decisions too. I think there were about 2 or 3 sprints, maybe 3 sprints within these 35 that we delivered something at the end, and halfway through the sprint, we realized, the person who's here with us, who's the CEO or the CCO, we didn't know that they need, I don't know, an investor is okay, and they sit in Silicon Valley unless, and that screws the process. So I've been very much more attentive to who is in the room and who has the ability to make decisions. All right. It's almost midnight here, so I'm going to run a little bit because these other parts are a little more repetitive, if you will. So I'm going to go through 4 and 5, and then we open up to a bigger discussion. All right. So day 4 is when we continue producing aggressively everything that we started to look at on day 3, like visuals are coming to life. You know, it's a bit of that process. People work in silos, but then they come back and share to the group. We give feedback, they go back, blah, blah, blah. On day 4, some things already materializing, especially the visuals, because they will be used to be inserted in a lot of different assets and messaging, blah, blah, blah. But we brought all the people that we need to produce the main assets. So they're there. We're doing interviews, we're doing voiceovers, we're shooting. We do whatever it is, we go to a studio next door, or we create a tiny studio there. The fact is, prototype your idea, make it happen, because unless you make it happen for real and you don't leave it only inside a keynote or a PowerPoint, which I hate, you will never know if it actually works. So we start making it happen, creating videos, even if they're not final, but we need to start putting it together. This is an audio composer doing like sound design for a branding process. We were doing like something in technology and coding right there, of course, blah, blah, blah. Then people just it's kind of like mayhem. So we start very structured minute by minute, and towards the end, when everything is being built, is a bit mayhem. So we try to create a bit of a resemblance of order. There is moments for breaks that everybody breaks, but it's essentially, let's just make this happen, pulling people, reconnecting, making sure you have the okays, and you're moving the information from one team to the next. So it's really cool. And then you start seeing a lot of these prototypes, blah, 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 blah. Obviously we didn't print the final prints for the new bottle design, but we printed it down the street and we wrapped it around the bottle with glue. So you just have to prototype the shit out of it. All right. And then what we do on day 4 is, again, we test, because now on day 4, the assets are coming to life already. So you can put it in front of a different group of consumers, of course, the same audience profile, but it's new people, because we want just like new blood, not the same people that we brought for day 2. So we again put this in front of them and say, look at this website. Where would you click? What do you think you have to do? Whatever it is that we're testing, now there's visuals to test. There are things to listen to. So it's a different type of testing. It's less of an open conversation. Sometimes we just watch them clicking and so forth. But we do test the assets as they're coming out, very fresh out of production, so that we have time to, tweak and make the adjustments according to how people are taking the idea. And again, big discoveries, like sometimes, for instance, this one, I think it was for a game we did in Cyprus for this big company called Wargaming. Total War Arena. Then we called the thing Blood for Blood, and which was an idea of donating blood in real life and doing something good, and he would get like extra powers in the game, blah, 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 blah. We brought it to people. People loved the idea, but they hated the name. They thought, oh my God, this is like I don't know, it's kind of scaring me to begin. I like the idea, but if you say it like that, so, you know, big inside, we could have run with like the name of the campaign and it wasn't as good. So whenever you test, there are insights that are very key and there is time to tweak and keep moving on. All right, test with people, let's go. I'm gonna skip this. Day 5 is a day of continuing aggressively producing. A lot of times things don't go right and we do it again. And sometimes the camera is gone, but then we do it with our cell phones. Like, it's about just making stuff happen. And then finally, we have a wrap up and a big celebration of the presentation. Again, if the sprint has gone right, which to me it has gone right pretty much every time, except for these 3 moments in which it was like, oh my God, and the client is left the room kind of thing, which was horrible. The goal of day 5 is not to present fearful that for the first time people are going to see it. It's more of a celebration to say, guys, this is what all of our, however many, from 8 to 20 brains have been able to put together. And it's a celebration of everything that we've created together. And then, you know, when we do branding, we print t-shirts, give it to everyone, la la la. It's, we try to do as celebratory as possible. And that's it.
Amazing. Give him a hand, guys. Come on, unmute your mics if you can, or just show your camera. Much appreciated.
Thank you, guys.
Really good. Really good.
Thank you.
That is really brilliant. Thank you so much, Andre, for doing that.
Amazing.
My pleasure, everyone.
So just to remind everyone, this will be recorded and it will be on the cloud. We are going to email you the presentation. Thanks for those who stayed a little bit over and for your contribution. You're an amazing audience. So many questions. We will also send more info later. Yeah, we will send you also the presentation so you can download. And if you want to get in touch with Andre for projects or any help or any assistance, Andre, do you want to do your pitch?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to do my pitch as I share my screen finally, because I think there's something important that I totally blew. Hold on, just 1 second. Where is it?
No worries. No worries.
Here. 1 second. Let me open. I know it's late, guys. Believe me, it's late for me here too. Here we go.
Worries.
All right. I was going to show this and not end at Edward Scissorhands because I think this is more important. Let me share my screen. Screen share. Here we go. Done. Okay, I just wanted to leave you guys with this because it's my email. If anybody is interested in knowing like any specific detail about whatever the hell it is that this is, write me. If somebody wants to hire me or us, hire me. And if you want to download the full presentation, write down this URL and you can download it. It's in PDF format. You won't have access to the videos because it's something that, you know, it's a little, I would have to get everyone to, you know, write NDAs and stuff like that, but just having like tiny screenshots, it's fine. So get the materials and hopefully it will help you in thinking about how to get stuff that you're doing in months to happen in a week. Hopefully it helps.
Wow, like magic. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you in a month. Your feedback is very welcome. Don't forget the survey, but most of all, don't forget to take care of your close ones. Take care. Wear a mask, stay at home, and I'll see you next month.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye now.
Bye, Andre. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.